Before we get to this episode, I want to ask you a quick question. Are you a woman who's 50 or older? And are you ready for a career or job change? Maybe you're yearning to do more meaningful work that really lights you up. I'm asking because my friends Dana and Wendy of Camp Reinvention have the coolest career program. It's called the Career Change Accelerator Program, and they coach amazing women in a 12-week program to reimagine what their careers might look like and to help them see new possibilities. Their very cool program is kicking off on October 27th. And if you even have an inkling, I might be ready for something new and different, I invite you to check out the details. There's a link in the show notes, and let's get busy and think about new possibilities.
Not being successful at an election, in my case, turned out to be a stepping stone to the next level. And here I am. And although I was heartbroken at the time, it gave me strength because it just did. It encouraged me to take a step back just to see where do I want to go from here.
Welcome to Reinvention Rebels. Stories of brave and unapologetic women, 50 to 90 years young, who have boldly reimagined life on their own terms to find new purpose and possibilities. I'm your host, Wendy Battles. Ready for a dose of inspiration? Let's get to it. Hey everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Reinvention Rebels podcast. I'm your host, Wendy, and I'm really glad you're here. If this is your first time listening, welcome. Welcome to this podcast that will help inspire you about what is possible when we decide we want to reinvent ourselves. I happen to focus on women between 50 and 90 and sharing their amazing stories, but the truth of the matter is what we talk about is universal. It applies to men, women, people of all ages. So I hope you'll settle in and soak up the wisdom that we'll be sharing today. I'm very excited about my guest, and I will introduce her in just a moment. But I do want to ask you, did you have a chance to listen to last week's episode about developing your bounce back ability muscle? That is everything when it comes to reinventing ourselves. And I shared my not so secret sauce about how you can do that, my 3 key ingredients. So if you didn't have a chance to check it out, I think you're really going to like it. It's short and sweet, but I think kind of impactful and will get you thinking about some things you can do. I also want to mention that on the 30th, September 30th, it was International Podcast Day. So I know you probably love podcasts of all different types and formats, but I got to just give a shout out to my fellow indie podcasters. So I want to encourage you to seek out a new podcast, find something new, maybe something you haven't heard of before. Do a little search about a topic that's of interest to you, and especially check out the amazing breadth of podcasts that are produced by women, what we call indie podcasts, that are fabulous. And in a future episode, I'll talk about some of my favorites. But on that note, let me tell you about my guest today. She's really amazing, and I think you're going to love her reinvention story and the ways that she's grown, she continues to grow, and how she even has a reinvention within a reinvention. What happens when we're open to reinventing ourselves in midlife? The truth is, we can change the trajectory of our life and others in impactful ways. This is the reinvention story of my guest today, Carol Hill Evans. It's the story of how unexpected midlife circumstances can lead to new opportunities we may not have even imagined. After losing her corporate job of 27 years, Carol went back to school to get her degree at 51. But then she did something most of us wouldn't even consider. She got into politics at 57, no less. First, at the local level, where she served as both vice president and president of the York City Council. That's where she honed her political chops and the ability to work with others toward mutual good. At 66, she was elected to the Pennsylvania House of Representatives, representing the 95th Legislative District in York, Pennsylvania. At 72, she's going strong and helping to solve the issues facing her district that include equitable education funding, improving economic development, addressing homelessness, and identifying and providing resources for veterans and first-line defenders. Carol exemplifies the idea that age is just a number. There are no limits, and that we can reinvent ourselves in unique ways that not only help ourselves, but also others. Carol Hill Evans, welcome to the Reinvention Rebels guest chair.
Thank you so much. I am so completely honored to be here, to be your guest. And so I'm looking forward to having this conversation.
I am too. And I will take just a moment to tell our listeners how we met, which was through your daughter, who I've never actually met, but we were in, I don't know, through some social media platform. I connected with your lovely daughter, who then told me about you and your reinvention story. And I said, that is so fascinating. I would love to interview your mom. And so thanks to Darlene, she connected us.
She did.
And the rest is history. So I'm really excited to be in conversation with you. And, you know, Carol, I have a lot of questions for you. I want to really dig into your reinvention story. It's so interesting. It's multi-layered. There's a lot to unpack. And I know that there's a lot of inspiration in your story that I believe will help inspire listeners about what's possible, seeing what you're doing at 72. So thank you. So here's where I'd like to begin.
Okay.
I know that like many people, you experienced a job loss at midlife. And 27 years is a long time to work at any organization, especially these days where people move around so much. So it feels like quite the track record. So I know that when we lose our job, that can throw us off our tracks. And I'm really curious about how it is you went back to school in your 50s and how that really served as a catalyst or a jumping off point for you to reinvent yourself in politics.
Well, I have to tell you, it wouldn't have happened, first of all, without God having everything that I have been experiencing on my path. And then my willingness and open-mindedness to accept whatever it was that came my way. And so when I found out that they were going to be closing the plant where I was working, I took a look at all of my prior college credits. And I thought, oh, gosh, now how am I going to make this happen? Penn State York was the first place that I looked. And so they were willing to accept my prior credits from other colleges and other programs that I had been in as I was accumulating college credits. And I was able to matriculate, and then I got my degree. I first got my associate's degree based on the credits that I had prior. And then I was able to, a year after that, get my bachelor's degree. And if it were not for the support of my husband and my mother, I probably wouldn't have done it. But they said, you ought to try it. Why not? You've waited all these years. You owe it to yourself. So that, along with the fact that as I was working during those years, I would see other people advance, people who didn't have the talent that I had, didn't have the knowledge that I had. And the one thing that they did have was a degree. And it didn't matter if it was a degree in gym, it was a degree. And so I thought, man, all those opportunities, I was knocking on the door, couldn't get in. So if what they want is a degree, I'm going to give them what they want in order for me to get what I want. And so I took my years of experience, which I have to say, when I was first in college, it was very difficult because at a young age, you just don't have the kind of appreciation that you do when you're seasoned. And so I went with all of my experience and went back into the classroom. And it was quite an experience being one of the older students in the classroom. And yet I was able to bring, a perspective that some of the others didn't have. And it actually helped me as I was taking those tests, as I was writing those essays, as I was reaching for the stars. It really helped to use that experience that I had in order to get my degree. And I have to tell you, we had our graduation out in the woods. It was very nice. Penn State has woods, what they call graduation woods. And I think I skipped from my seat all the way up to the other side. I was just so thrilled. It just was such a good feeling of accomplishment, knowing that I had finally gotten my college degree.
That is such a big deal.
It really is.
And I love how motivated you were. I love how that's different than sometimes when you're 20 something or you're, late teens, and it's all very exciting, but maybe you're not giving it the same focus that you were at this age when you had a whole different level of motivation to do this and how it could help you. But what I also heard you say that really struck me was how your husband and mother encouraged you.
They did.
And I feel like that's so important because I talk a lot about how reinvention is a team sport.
It is indeed.
Right? That we are better at it, or we can excel perhaps with more ease when people around us are supporting us. Yes. And that, just exemplifies that so beautifully.
And it's so important to surround yourself with those people who believe in you, who can encourage you, and who can keep you grounded. And the one thing that my mother would always say as I was, climbing to where I am now, she would always say, no matter how high in the clouds your head gets, always be sure your feet are on the ground. And it took me, even as an adult, it took me a minute to understand what she was saying. But then as I moved my way from serving on the planning commission to running for city council to hearing those voices and then, getting to the state level, I understand every day more and more exactly what she was talking about. It's very easy to get into a position of perceived power and allow that power to be the driving motivation for what you're doing. And so you have to stay focused. And it is a feel-good moment when you know that you've beaten everybody else in the race and, for being elected, and you rise to the level of, wow, I've made it. It's really easy to get kind of full of yourself. And so that's what she was talking about. Be sure that your feet are solidly planted on the ground. So that was just something that I will never forget her telling me.
That is such wisdom.
It is.
Especially these days, because I think any of us, no matter what state or country we live in, we can look at politicians and see so many people that seem like they're less focused on their constituents and their needs and more focused on that idea of that perceived power that they might have. So that doesn't feel like they're necessarily working on our behalf. So I appreciate that you have this grounding about it, because I know it's not easy. And I guess that leads to a great question of how did you go from getting your degree into politics, or were you doing that before? How did that part kind of unfold?
Well, actually, once I got my degree, there happened to be a position open in the city of York where I grew up. And so I was able to, I was able to get the job. And what that job was going around throughout all the different neighborhoods in the city, finding out what their issues were, bringing those issues back to the administration, and trying to find resources for our residents of the city. As I did that, I kept hearing things about, we need our taxes lowered. We need our crime lowered. We need all kinds of things like trash picked up. We need all of these things. And it's like, how do you get all of these things accomplished? And even though there were some resources that were available, it was never enough. It just seemed like there was never enough. Never enough funding, never enough cooperation from, the administration, and never enough conversation from the elected officials to the residents. And there turned out to be at one point after a year and a half, my job was eliminated once again. So that was two.
Gosh.
And because of budget cuts. And so I went to work part-time at another fairly worldwide organization. And as I was there, I was watching York City Council on television, national television, with our elected officials arguing with one another, not getting along, yelling, screaming, talking about each other's spouses. It was a crap show, to be honest with you.
Wow.
And I'm sitting at my lunch out in the county, and I'm listening to people laugh and, say, oh, that's the best show. You have to watch it on Tuesday nights because, yes, if you want to be entertained and you want to see how clowns act, you ought to watch York City Council meetings. That's why the city can't do this, and that's why the city is that, and that's why nobody wants to live there anymore. And the whole time I'm sitting there listening to this, I'm saying, you know what? That can't be my city that they're talking about. That is not the city that I know. That is not the city that I grew up in. It's not the city that I live in now and that I love. And so I thought, you know what? I don't know anything about city council, but I know I can do better than that. I can lead. If I, decide I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, I can lead from a level of civility. So we all sit down, we talk to one another about issues and try to get them resolved. And so I threw my hat in the ring. First time out for city council, I won. I was the top vote getter. I think it's probably as a result of my having been in the position that I was at the city, from people knowing my face, knowing my name, and a level of comfort and reassurance in knowing that even if they didn't get what they were hoping for, they would get a response from me. They would get an explanation, and they would get actual face time. And so when they said that they would support me, I believed and trusted them. I went to my husband and my mother and said, this is what I want to do. What do you think? We sat down, we put it away for a while. And then after 2 or 3 weeks, we came back, we talked about it again, and we developed a plan of how I was going to get there. And so they were my biggest, staunchest supporters and motivators too. And so the three of us, actually, I ran for city council, but it was the three of us that were there. My mother, she would have been in her 80s and was going around getting signatures on petitions for me, going with me to knock on doors. Day of election, she was handing out waters to people, asking them to vote for me, giving out my literature. My husband drove me around from spot to spot to spot, and we did it. And it was as a result of their support and the people, my constituents, the ones that voted me into office. And so I have since from that point have felt just a responsibility to not let them down and to be what they had hoped I would be when they voted me into office. And so that carried from city council to the state house, and it continues now. I do it for the people.
I love that. I hardly ever hear that. And it's just, so that alone is very inspiring. Someone who's truly committed to public service and your constituents listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think it's very interesting that that job you had, even if it was eliminated,
Mm-hmm.
was an important part of your reinvention journey as
Absolutely.
An elected official, which I think is very interesting that you had the opportunity to connect with constituents and that they trusted you, that you had a chance to build trust by being present, by talking to them, by, as you said, following up. And I think it's interesting that sometimes things happen and we can't understand the why. Like, why did this happen to me? Why did I lose this job? I mean, other than, yes, I understand there were budget cuts, but I also think that sometimes things are unfolding in ways that we can't see. But to your point, you mentioned the power of God and like trusting.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And he teaches us lessons that are hard learned, but very helpful in any journey that we take. Because once I was on city council, as I was saying earlier, sometimes we can get a little full of ourselves. We listen to the wrong voices. And as a result of some of that, I decided that I would run for mayor for the city of York. I was running against who was our first African-American female mayor. And it wasn't because I thought I was better than she was. It was as a result of a lot of people that were out in the community that kept saying, you did good on city council. You should run for mayor. You should run for mayor. You should run for mayor. People started contributing to a campaign that I had, that I had established, and I decided that I would go ahead and run for mayor. And I lost. I didn't lose by much. I think it was less than 300 votes, but nevertheless, I lost. But because I was city council, we had our city council meeting the next night after the election, after I'd cried my eyes out because I felt very disappointed, right?
Yeah.
And now I have to get on screen and say congratulations to everybody who raised their hand to get involved in politics and to all of the winners, knowing that I was not one of them.
Yeah, that is so hard.
It was probably one of the harder things I've had to do, but I had to do it because it was my role, it was my job, and I was not going to disappoint people. And so after I congratulated them, it was perhaps a year or two later when I came into this seat. So had I been mayor, I probably would not have decided to run for state representative. But as God would have it, and what was on my path, I followed it to this seat. And when I was asked to, again, decide, because the gentleman who was in this position prior to me took a job somewhere else. And so he was, the party had to choose someone to put their name on the ballot for the November, because the primary was already over and now it was time for the general election. And they had to select someone in order to get their name on the ballot so that they could run in the general election in that November. And so it was me and 5 other people, and we talked, we interviewed, and I was selected. And I have to tell you, I was very humbled by that. I was very just bewildered because I had no idea what a state rep did. And I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. I knew what I was saying I could do, but you never really know what you can do until you're actually in a position. And then you know what your limitations are, what you can do, what you can't do, things you'd like to change, and how much of a change you actually can make. So yes, so it was, a window that closed and a door that opened wide open. And so I'm eternally grateful for that lesson. It was hard when I had to go through it, when I had to learn it. But you know what? Here I am. And I feel very blessed to be where I am. Yeah.
That is so true. That things, I always feel like things work out in the end, even though I sometimes go kicking and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
What if I could try not to do it that way? Right? If I could just maybe be more present with some of the lessons that are a little tougher to learn and absorb, but then lead to these other things that I feel like we're meant to do, whatever that is. For each of us, maybe I wouldn't have to make it so hard.
No.
Because I spend a lot of time making things more difficult than they have to be.
We all do. We're human. It's what we do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I want to take a moment and tell you about a new podcast that I'm introducing that I think you might find really interesting. And to be honest, it has nothing to do with women or reinvention. My day job is that I work at Yale University in cybersecurity, and we are introducing a podcast called Be Cyber Fit, BEE Cyber Fit. And it's all about simplifying cybersecurity for everyone. Now, that's totally different than what I do now, but it's really cool because there are so many confusing things. We hear about breaches and ransomware and don't click on links, and it's hard to know what to do. In this really fun podcast, we help deconstruct and simplify things that you can do to build your cyber fitness. I've included a link in the show notes. I want to encourage you to check it out because it is a podcast for everyone. You, your friends, family, colleagues, your adult children, perhaps your parents or grandparents, anyone who's online and could benefit from learning about simple ways to build their cyber fitness to stay safe online. I hope you check it out. I'm kind of curious because you had this corporate career and then you got all of the experience locally on the city council and even in the campaign for the mayor and then, running for state representative and moving into this different role. To what degree do you think that your past experience helped you with reinventing yourself in this bigger way in politics?
Well, I served in HR in different roles. I worked in payroll. I worked in I did interviews. I did recruitment. I did pensions. Did retirements. And again, when you're experiencing other people's issues and how the changes that they're going through is affecting their lives, it makes you really sit up and take notice. And so the experiences that I had when they closed down first Caterpillar, then Harley Davidson, I was in the role where I actually had to do presentations of retirement benefits. So like what these folks were going to be getting going forward each month when they retired, or else when they were offered a package, what they would be getting each month. So kind of letting them know this is what your new life is going to look like. And I can tell you, some of them had never been out of the county, had never worked anywhere in their whole lives, and they had been there for 35 or 40 years. And it was just a shock to everyone's system. And trying to help someone who is so incredibly vulnerable gives you a sense of compassion that I never thought I had. It gives you a sense of wanting to help and serve. And I never considered myself a public servant when I was doing those jobs, but it's those jobs that prepared me for being able to help people when they're at their most vulnerable and when their need is the greatest. And plus, being in HR is pretty much all about processes and how they work. And so being in a position now where I had to make legislation, pass a budget, those kinds of things, having a process in place was key for me, because if there's a process in place, you follow the process. It helps to take emotion out of everything. You're simply following a process. And so that helped me to keep my composure when it seemed like everything around everyone else was falling apart. And I wanted to just be there and hug them and, and help them or cry with them. And I had to stay composed, and knowing that I was following the process really helped. And it helps me even now today. So even as I go through, whether it's managing my office or establishing the office, that's my district office. It's like, how are we going to do certain things? There's a process. We need to develop the process, and this is what we need to follow for everyone. There are going to be exceptions to every process, but if you have one in place, it takes a lot of emotion out, and it tends to make you more successful at what you're trying to do.
Yeah,
and that's helpful even in life, just generally in life.
It really is. And I think that's interesting, you talking about taking the emotion out, because I think, these days we can be so emotional about so many different things. And when it comes to our lives, and you talked about the vulnerability, when bad things happen, it's hard not to be emotional, right? We're human beings. And I can see how some of the past experiences you had were preparing you, as you mentioned, for this ability to listen and to have empathy, and to just, because I think ultimately people want to be heard. We all want to be heard, in whatever way that might manifest. And having those deep listening skills, listening to your constituents, seems like such a key part of being able to serve effectively.
I think it is instrumental. And I've heard people say, a lot of times, well, thank you for listening, because nobody else would listen to me. And a lot of times I found that people sometimes, as you said, people just want to be heard. It's I don't want to say less important, but sometimes it's just equally important to be heard as it is to actually have a resolution. And I found that it's like, okay, so I'm going to listen, because we may not have to do anything else. Once we listen to what the issue is, we can, offer whatever resources are available. But even if we can't resolve that problem, they know that they've been heard. And that for them that's critical.
Yeah, I would imagine so. And I would imagine too, that if someone has had years of feeling like they haven't been listened to, or being frustrated, or just the bureaucracy of sort of the political system, and we're just sometimes cogs in that wheel, that I can see the power of these skills you have to listen, to give all of your attention to that person that's right in front of you. That's like leading with such, compassion and interest, that it feels like is lacking from so many politicians. So I love this. I'm like, can you come move to Connecticut? Come on up, Carol. Come represent us. I haven't talked, to a lot of politicians, but this is so refreshing to hear. And also to hear like what is possible, that, just goes back to this idea we've talked about, that no matter your age or stage, we can always reinvent ourselves. We can always find new possibilities. We can build on those experiences we've had. And I think that sometimes God or the universe or whomever is leading us, if we're open to it, is leading us to this path of what we're meant to do.
Yes, I believe that with everything that I am. I believe the universe has ears, and our voices, when we send them to the universe, we're giving power to what it is we want. And so I'm always cautious and careful, and remind people, be careful what you're saying, because the universe has ears.
It's so true. It's so true. So this whole process of reinventing yourself can have ups and downs, or things that go well and things that don't, like when you lost the mayoral election and you were like, it was so disappointing. What would you say has been your biggest challenge about reinventing yourself, and what did you do to overcome it?
Recognizing that that the position that I'm in currently actually does have a lot of influence and a lot of power. And we were raised in a household where we were very humble, because we didn't have any choice, right? We had to be humble. There was no talking back. There was no expressing ourselves. There was only getting our education, graduating, either going into the military, getting married, going to college, those kinds of choices and things like that. And so that's how I was raised. That's the era in which I was raised. And so I never realized that I could actually use the power that is inherent in this position to help people until the more I'm out in the community and the more people see me and they say, thank you for doing what you did. Thank you for allowing your staff to help me because the problem went away. I'm so much happier. I got my rebate, it's like all of those things. And so really, and I haven't overcome it because I still at times don't acknowledge the amount of power that this job has and how to wield it without allowing it to wield me. Okay. And so I really have to keep myself grounded. So I have not overcome it. I still have to remind myself that I'm only one person. I'm only one voice. I can only do what I can do. And I'm not in this position to be powerful. I'm in this position to use what power is afforded me and make lives better for the people that voted me into office. And so I'm still learning. Every day, something happens where I have to, take a deep breath and calm down. Or just if someone does not acknowledge me the way I'm expecting to be acknowledged, that, all right, that's okay. I'm still going to do the work. I still am who I am. In the political environment in which I serve now, it's very contentious. It's very challenging. And it's very divided.
Yeah.
And so there are times when I am deliberately shunned or deliberately overlooked, not because of the color of my skin, but because of my party affiliation. I had to get used to that. And I have to continue to raise my voice so that I can be heard without yelling, without any angst, but simply by stating the purpose and stating the issue and stating what it is I'm trying to get for my district. And so I'm still learning. I haven't overcome it, but I'm constantly reminding myself. I keep little tablets around that have little positive statements around so I can look at them. I have posters on my wall that say, through God, all things are possible. And so just really keeping in touch with myself, my inner spirit, who I call God, it's very critical. It's very critical. It's an everyday thing. It's easy to get filled with all of that. And so I'm constantly calming myself down and keeping myself even and level. Yeah.
I love that you have things that you do, things that support you, things that you can say, okay, right now I need to calm myself down because I don't like the situation.
Exactly.
But yet I'm trying to move forward in this process of, this is how things work within the, the boundaries of how things are. But I really appreciate that because I think that so much of this, because what you're saying to me speaks to self-care. I am showing up for myself. I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing what I need to do to be able to continue to support my constituents in the best way that I can, to bring my best self to this job. And I feel like self-care is such an important part of reinventing ourselves, no matter where we are in that journey, whether we're just starting out out and we have an idea or a dream, like, I want to reinvent myself to do X, or, as we continue to do it, we can continue, as you're talking about, to reinvent ourselves. What I like to say is a reinvention within a reinvention.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
Right. That we're still wanting to be our best and, offer the best and evolve as we grow, which is what I hear you doing. And I think that's a great example for people that are listening or thinking about reinvention or in the midst of a reinvention, that it is an ongoing process. It doesn't sort of stop when you're like, well, I'm elected now and I'm good.
No, it doesn't end there. And in fact, for me personally, I am still and currently reinventing myself yet again, because since over the last 2 years, of course, with COVID and everything, it's been very challenging. But personally, the last election, 3 days after the last election, I lost my husband. He had a blood clot following a heart procedure, and I lost him. And that was after 30 years of being with him. So, so now who am I? I'm a widow. Do I want that label? What does that all mean? Just trying to figure things out about how I move forward without having him, because he was my right hand. And then 4 months after I lost my husband, I lost my mother. And so now here I am trying to figure out, who am I? Right? Because my left hand and my right hand have both been taken away from me. And I had to decide if I was going to do this journey by myself, if I could do this journey by myself. And who am I now that I don't have a parent and I don't have a spouse? My children are out of state, and that's fine because they're very successful. And this is not about being sad or angry or anything that they're not here. But I'm here. And so I have to now figure out, how do I need to be, and who am I as a state representative? I will continue in that realm. But when you talk about self-care, the one thing that I haven't done that I really feel like I am going to do is to be in touch with the therapist, so I can work through who I am now and forgive myself for anything that I feel I didn't do or should have done or could have done while I had them both here with me. And so that's kind of a personal kind of reinvention within a reinvention within a reinvention journey that I am going through, and I will take. And with God's help, when I say I'm alone, it's not without God. I know that he's here. I know that he's with me. I know that he wakes me up every day and comforts me in the evening. And so I know that, I feel that, but as a living, breathing, human, African-American female, who am I? And so I'm anxious to find out what the answer is. I'm anxious to see what's available or how I come out of all of this. So I just thought I would mention that too, because it is more reinvention. Yep. And life changes, and life makes us change, whether we want to change or not. And we have to be prepared for that. And it's not always easy. And it is filled with, at times, it's filled with heartache and loss and wonderment and questions. And those are can be dark places and just places where you have to be by yourself. But the rest of life is just so fulfilling and so filled with, hope, and being in a position where you can offer hope makes you feel hopeful. Being in a position where you can offer resources makes you feel like on top of the world, right? Because you've been able to help someone who needed help. And so taking all of those good times, taking all of those happy, important times is making those those darker kind of times less dark. And so that is part of my reinventing myself as well. Not traveling back to the dark places, but dwelling and living in the light places and the good places and the happy places. Do I ever feel alone? Sometimes I do, but I don't feel lonely because I have so many people around me, so many family and friends that are just so supportive and so loving, and they keep in touch and they make sure that I am the Carol who they think I ought to be. And so, yes. And so that's why I said earlier, it's important to have people around you that know you, that can support you, that can pick you up when you're not feeling so up, and keep you from hitting rock bottom when you feel like that's where you're headed. And so that's part of reinventing yourself too. Getting rid of all those who are naysayers, those who would pull you down while you're already down, and just cleaving to those who feel your heart, who can be compassionate to you, who can be loving and kind, and be a mentor, because I'm not the first one to have lost, family members, close family members. And just listening to other people's stories is helpful to me, and it helps me in my journey and my reinvention. Yes. So thank you for listening. Thanks for the patience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you just so beautifully talked about, a difficult time that, as you said, life is full of ups and downs. And sometimes we're not prepared for these things, especially when it's those people. I mean, those were your people that, who are always there for you. And that's a hard thing to work through. But what I appreciate, one is your openness to working on it, and, the positive perspective that you have all of these great things going on, and people to help support you, and that you have these other people that are now Team Carol Reinvention.
That's right. Yes. Thank you.
Right? So you have a
You're
different team.
Absolutely right.
Right?
Yes.
But you still have a team of people that love you, care about you, want to see you shine. And I think that makes all the difference, because you are adding light to the world with what you do. And maybe, I don't mean this to the global world, right? But to your world in York and area and Pennsylvania through the work that you're doing, the light that you add to people's lives, the hope that you're able to help create. That's powerful.
Thank you.
And important. And I feel like in a time that's dark and chaotic and unsure, and there's, all of us feel uncertain about, I think, so many different things, whether it's in our local community or our family or the larger world. There's so many things that feel sometimes scary, and being that light, Carol, that is everything. I love that. That makes me so happy. So as we wrap up, I want to ask you this one last question, which is, there are people that are listening that I know are moved by your experience, your reinvention journey, who perhaps can see a part of themselves in this. They might have a totally different experience, but there, I'm sure, are parallels. And I know that there are some people listening who are thinking, I really want to reinvent myself. I want to find my groove like Carol has, and do in whatever way, suits them. But it can be scary to get started. It's kind of hard sometimes to take that first step. Like, you have this idea, but you're like, but then again, I'm not sure, but it seems like a good idea and I want to do it, but I don't know. What advice do you have for someone who has that inkling about reinvention, but they're not sure where to start? What would you suggest that they could do?
You have to decide who you are as a person. Look inside first and find your center, find your soul. We all have one, and there's a spirit. Reach inside, if it comes through meditation or reading a Bible or just listening to your favorite music that gets you out of yourself, but into yourself, if that makes sense. And then I'm a process person. Develop your process, right?
Right.
What is your goal? And what are the steps that you're going to take to get there? Once you write it down, revisit it. See if there's anything that you missed. Find out where you're trying to go. And whatever it is, don't be afraid to fail. Our failures are what make us more successful if we learn when we fail. Okay. So there's always lessons. There are always teachable moments. We have to be open-minded. Sometimes we have to have our ears open and our mouths closed. Sometimes when we would really like to be saying something, it might be a good idea. When you feel like you have the hardest time is like when you really want to say something, and then think about it. Think about it and see if there's a way that you can just close your mouth, open your ears, as well as your mind, so that you can be open-minded to whatever comes your way. There's, like not being successful at an election, in my case, turned out to be a stepping stone to the next level. And here I am. And although I was heartbroken at the time, it gave me strength because it just did. It encouraged me to take a step back just to see, where do I want to go from here? And while I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go, God said, I got this. And this is where you're going to go.
Yes.
You're going to go to the State House. And he opened it. But I was open-minded enough to be able to hear that and to be able not to be afraid, because my last run was not successful, to not be afraid to try again. And if it's something that you really want, don't ever give up. Don't give up. Sometimes it'll take us 4, 5, or even 6 or 7 times before we are successful. But if we really want it, those times that we tried and didn't quite make it, use whatever lessons you can find or learn so that it will give you the strength and the courage to take the next step, but never stop stepping in the direction. And one of my favorite sayings is by Henry David Thoreau that says, go confidently in the direction of your dreams. I hold on to that. I go confidently. And if I get knocked back a bit, I just keep going because I know I'm going to reach those stars, right?
I love that. Go confidently in the direction of your dreams. It is so true.
Mm-hmm.
Fail forward.
Yes, I love that. Yes.
And keep on moving. Yeah.
Yes.
I that's like, to me, the essence of what you're saying is, yes, we can fail, but so what?
Yep. Keep moving.
And, those are some of our best lessons, as you just exemplified with the story of running for the mayor. You didn't get it. And I know that feeling of total disappointment when you have your heart set on something and you just feel like you could add so much value. It is horribly disappointing when it doesn't work out the way we want it to. Exactly. But it also is this powerful lesson in, overcoming the challenges and keeping going. And that's so key also. Yeah. Oh, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you. And I know that people that are listening, Carol, are thinking, where can I find Carol? Like, where is she? Is she on social media? Can I follow her? Tell us where people can find you. I am personally, I try to stay off of all of the social media as much as I can because of it's very easy to commingle. And I like to keep lines clearly defined. So I would send everyone to my Rep Hill-Evans account. I am state representative. If you just put my name in, it will bring it up. If you Google me, I do come up, and you can follow. I think I have a campaign page out because I am running for my 4th term in the State House now. And I have no opponent, so I'm going to be walking into the next 2 years, and I owe that and very grateful to just all the hard work that we've been doing. So Carol Hill Evans or Rep, R-E-P, Hill Evans at pahouse.net would get you there, or just Carol Hill Evans as a Google, and it will get you there. I'm also on YouTube.
through some of the events that I've been doing that were recorded, and some of the issues that we're advocating for. And so you can find me. I'm all over YouTube. I'm Googled. I never thought I'd be Googled, but yes, you can Google me.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yes.
And this is great. And I'll put all of that into the show notes too.
Okay,
so people can easily click and find you just a click away or a tap away if you're on your phone.
I know.
I cannot thank you enough. I can't thank you enough for gracing me with your presence, for sharing your heart and your beautiful reinvention story, and how you keep reinventing. It's a gift. So thank you.
It's a blessing. Yes. And I thank you so much for this opportunity. I really do.
It was my pleasure. And I cannot wait to share our interview with the world.
Okay.
Let's inspire some people, Carol.
Thank you.
Wasn't that an inspiring episode? Carol Hill Evans. Oh my gosh, so many nuggets of inspiration she shared. I loved her vulnerability and how she shared her heart and how she talked about that reinvention is an ongoing process and she's still figuring it out. And she's had recent losses that have helped shift her perspective, and she's broadening what I like to call her reinvention team. So I am so appreciative of the time I had to spend with her and how she is lighting up the world with what she's doing. That's what it's all about. Just figuring out how we can shine and help others shine, and how we can be our best selves as we age and reinvent ourselves. If you loved this episode as much as I did, would you do me a teeny tiny favor? Especially if you're an Apple Podcast listener, if you wouldn't mind sharing a review and rating the podcast, I would totally appreciate it, because it makes it easier for other people to find it. And that's what we want to do, inspire as many people as possible. And by the way, if this got you thinking and sparked something in you, like, I want to be on my own reinvention journey too, don't forget to check out my free audio, 5 questions to spark your curiosity and inspire your Reinvention Rebels journey. You'll see a link to it in the show notes. And finally, I can't wait till next week. I've got a great solo episode coming up for you about what it means to be perfectly imperfect and how that relates to our Reinvention Rebel journey. Until next time, keep shining your light. The world needs you and everything you have to offer. Hey, Rebel. If this episode inspired you to think about what's possible in your life, I'll share a little secret. Any of us can reinvent ourselves no matter where we are in our lives, any age, any stage. We just have to decide to get started. Here's a super simple way for you to get going with your reinvention dreams. Download my audio, 5 questions to spark your curiosity and inspire your reinvention journey. I share 5 key questions that will spur your thinking, help you uncover your dreams, and motivate you to take action. Because if not now, when? Details in the show notes. Let's get inspired together.